The Book of Flying by Keith Miller. 2. The Robber Queen. 3 days he floundered forward. He found plenty of brooks to replenish his water supply, but on the morning of the 3rd day devoured the butt end of his last sausage, and though he scoured the undergrowth for mushrooms or familiar fruits, his supper was chamomile tea. The next day he found some nuts, but nothing else. Though he grew more adept at squirming through the undergrowth, he made paltry progress. So he was elated when, on the 3rd day, he struck a path leading southeast. The trail was scant, a meandering sliver of easier walking, but barrier-free. The prints of boar and gazelle showed on bare earth, but he was surprised to see as well the traces of boot heels, for he'd not thought humans dwelt this deep. Now he tossed aside his stick and strode swiftly, delighted to swing his arms, straighten his spine. Late in the afternoon, from an eye's edge, he glimpsed a spangle of gold and a splash of sun on steel, but before he could squeal, his feet were swiped from under him, and he lay with his face against the leaves while his pack was hauled from his shoulders. A boot tipped him onto his back, and he looked up into 3 grizzled faces and the cold snouts of 3 knives cocked at his neck. "Your money or your life," a bandit snarled. "I haven't any money," Pico faltered, "so I suppose you'll have to take my life." "Arr," said another, "we'll see what a Devi says about that." He yanked Pico upright, bound his hands, and they set off along the trail. They walked for an hour while the light failed, the bandits prodding him in the spine if they felt he wasn't walking fast enough, and at last, through the trees ahead, he saw the twinkle of firelight. In the slow-eyed night, the bonfire of the robber camp was ringed by tambourines, rung by twirling girls wearing only patched skirts and bangles, pearl-decked anklets, and great gold earrings. The men sat on logs. They sometimes slapped and sometimes they clapped intricate counterpoint to the patter of slim feet. The robbers were stubble-jawed, their eyes blade-sharp, blood-dark, fingers nimble as lizards. They wore open shirts, chains on chests, embroidered vests, hoops in lobes, colored kerchiefs, brass-buckled boots. Incessantly they honed knives to edges which might slice flesh as easily as entering water. Incessantly they smoked black tobacco turned into licked papers, the cigarettes lit from firebrands. Night is the thief's domain, and if he's not stealing, he'll pass the hours under moonbeam, starshine, singing and boasting. Daytimes for dreams, love-making among shadows, but night's the country of the robber's heart, and he'll always stay awake until dawn. Pico, trussed, lay on the outskirts of the firelight, entranced by the melodies, the twinkle of ankles beneath gusting skirts, the swing of honey-filled breasts. The fire pooled in siphoned color, the color of cloth like the color of jewels, bloodstone, black opal, lapis lazuli, emerald, a necklace about a hot throat. The flames snapped their fingers at the stars. Then, amid the dancing girls, a robber rose like an uncoiling cobra, and Pico saw, when the fire flapped at the robber's face, it was a woman, her eyes green as brass. She called a tall bandit to her, and the girls subsided as, pelvis vised to pelvis, the two strutted around the circle rocking like clock weights. The man dipped her till her hair scooted over the flames, and she laughed, a noise like a landslide. Her name was Devi, and she was the robber queen, pretty as a leopard. with a voice like rocks shaken in a cauldron, a tongue swift as a whip, haunches hard as though carven. All night the thieves told tales of their exploits, and she was at the center of most, her deeds more daring than any, her audacity outlandish. Above the brand on her forearm was a constellation of scars, one for every death at her hands, some of them recent. She could touch a scar and tell a tale of murder. Pico heard that night stories to rival any recounted in the books of the library. 50 locks picked to snatch a stick of silver. Tower walls scaled towing laden swags. Families murdered in their sleep. Half a town set alight to reach a cache of rubies. He was appalled, enthralled. After midnight she came to him, sliced away his bonds, and straddled a log beside him, making a cigarette while he rubbed his wrists. "Have a smoke," she said, and poked the cigarette between his lips, rolling another one-handed while fetching a brand from the fire. He didn't smoke, but felt it polite to partake under the circumstances, so he leaned forward to receive her flame. The first suck caused such a chaos of coughing, she had to whack his back while the collected company howled. "And I'll bet you're a virgin, too," she said as he sat back, eyes awash. He nodded. "But I've kissed a girl before," he said, then clutched his palms to his cheeks, which seemed suddenly feverish. "Been a while since you talked with a woman?" she asked, and he nodded again, but still could not meet her eyes. She undid the drawing of his knapsack and emptied it onto the ground, rifling through the heap while the robbers looked on. She pocketed the compass and tried on the blue velvet coat, but found it too narrow in the shoulders. The books she splayed, peered at bemusedly, then made to cast them into the fire, but at this Pico wailed. "Not my books!" he cried. "Take my other possessions, anything you like, but not my books. Oh, please, spare my books." "What use are they?" Adevi asked, flipping through his notebook. "They tell stories if you know how to read. They are worlds filled with all manner of people and places. Here." And he stretched to take one, but she lifted it out of reach. "Perhaps they have some value, Adevi," an onlooker suggested, and she shrugged and swept the volumes aside. "So, intruder," she turned to him, "are you a lost hunter or a spy from another band? Speak carefully now. The Queen of Lies has an ear for the truth." He sat straight-backed and looked around the ring of faces. "My name is Pico," he said, "and I come from the city by the sea. I am a librarian by trade, a caretaker of books. Those objects you so nearly tossed into the fire? I doubt they would fetch anything in the market, as I was the city's sole collector of such oddities. My tale is this. As a boy, I loved a winged girl, but due to certain conventions, we were forced apart. My parents, too, were winged, but by a fluke of birth I am wingless, my desire denied me by the fickle fingers of fate, and the only hope I have of holding my love again is to acquire wings. So when one day a mushroom revealed a letter from a long-dead librarian claiming that the Morning Town, legendarily the site of the school for flying, lies not overseas but eastward, beyond the forest's far side, I packed my knapsack and set out to seek my wings or die in the attempt. 3 days I struggled forward till yesterday, when I found the path that led me into the ambush of your men." "It's clear you're telling the truth," Adevi said, "but you're a simpleton if you think there's an end to the forest, or if there was one that you could reach it. Men," she swiveled to the robbers, "which of you would be willing to accompany this lad farther east?" At that the throng muttered and shuffled. "Not so foolhardy," one mumbled. "I'll meet any man hand to hand," another said, "but there are unnatural beings in the woods. It's not fair fighting something more than human, or less. We keep to our side, they keep to theirs. That's what I say. And the other robbers growled agreement. You'll meet any man, you say, a Devi called to him, but are you a match for a woman? And the robber scowled and blushed, twisting a stick in the fire while the band jeered, though all in fact feared their captain. A cowardly lot, admittedly, a Devi turned back to Pico, but their fear might be rooted in something real. I am on a quest, he told her. I must find my wings or perish in the undertaking. You're not afraid of monsters? And there was an avidness in her glance. Of course I'm afraid, but this is my path. Well, this is all chatter anyway, she said briskly, snapping her cigarette into the fire. Your journey ends here. Will you join my robber band? Will you let us brand your forearm? She pushed up a sleeve and displayed the symbol, a sickle moon. Will you join our midnight adventures? The robber's life is rough, but the prizes are the racing heart, the moonlit dancing, the hot spurt of blood on the hand, and, of course, the gold. The gold. And she dipped a wrist into a pocket and tipped a rivulet of coins at Pico's feet. Do I have another option? He asked. Cold steel in your neck, she replied, and began to pare her fingernails with the tip of her falchion. Well, I guess I'll become a thief then, said Pico unhappily. Though I don't think I'll be much good. I'm a pacifist, you see. But a Devi paid him no heed. Men, gather round, she shouted. Welcome your new comrade. The robbers stood in a ring about Pico and bade him place his left palm on the outthrust points of their knives and recite the following oath. By the dirk's edge and the dark side of the moon, by the glitter of gold and the hot hammer of blood, I swear to be true to the robber tribe and to Adevi, my chieftain. And then all the bandits slashed their palms, and Adevi seized Pico's fingers and gashed his hand, and he clasped each of the robbers' fists in turn, passing crimson handshakes around the circle. We must have a toast, Adevi yelled. What will you drink, lad? I believe I'll have a glass of white wine, Pico said, and the company guffawed. Adevi scowled. There's whiskey or rum. What'll it be? Rum, then, he mumbled. They uncorked squat, square bottles, and someone gave Pico a cut crystal tumbler and tipped a portion of viscous liquid into it. He dipped a cautious tongue, then sipped slowly, the alcohol lava in his belly. A Devi cast him a green wink, and he lifted the glass with a tentative grin. His legs soon swayed under him, and he had difficulty bringing the brim to his lips, but he was glad for the days when a smirking bandit approached with a cherry-bright brand, called others to hold Pico down, and pressed the iron into his flesh, the grilled odor gagging him, the delayed pain insane. The robbers' tents tugged guy lines in the sway of breezes, the fire pit faced by their triangular doorways, and robbers slept, half out of these shelters, still clutching whiskey bottles as though fearful a companion might nab them as they napped. Circling the camp as some gesture toward adornment, human skulls were set upturned like cups on logs, and snapdragons spilled from their soil-filled brain pans, sprouting out eye sockets, nodding on loose molars. All around the camp were scattered signs of an incongruous decadence: plush armchairs, brass lamps, fancy end tables, paintings in gilt frames, the rotting flotsam of robberies. The bandits ate meat from spits of green wood, together with fine caviar and aged cheeses, off fancy china with their fingers, and they gulped their rum from golden goblets. Their attire was sumptuous, a hodgepodge of articles lifted from the wardrobes of the city. The linen trousers were grease-spotted, silk shirts blood-spattered. They pampered only their knives. A Devi presided from a green canvas pavilion open to the rest of the camp, and there she rutted in the day with her companion of the moment on a soiled divan, 2 daggers sunk in the cladding of its arm, her shouts barging through the wood. After these encounters she rose naked, hair like the brush of an old broom, and straddled the embers to piss, steam hissing between her thighs, and Pico did not know where to look. His second day in the camp, as he returned from filling his plate at the fire, a robber knocked him to the ground, and when he struggled up, knocked him down again. He looked up into a bearded leer. "Can't keep your balance, pretty boy?" The bandit lifted Pico by the hair and seized him between the legs. "Come on, pretty boy, you're a robber now. Let's see you scrap." Pico slapped at the bandit's face, and with more luck than aim, caught the base of the crooked nose with the heel of his hand. The robber released him with a grunt, and Pico fell to the ground and began to cry. Through tears he glimpsed a steel-tipped boot drawn back and cringed, but the blow never arrived. As he cowered, he heard a gasp and a gurgle, and the ground shivered. He looked up to see the bandit jerking beside him and wondered if it was some sort of fit, and then saw a knife handle like a sudden cancer sprouted from the man's neck. His eyes were fixed on Pico's face with a look of terror such as the poet had never seen, and then white washed across them and blood spilled from his lips. A Devi strode up and bent to retrieve her knife, wiping it on the dead man's trousers. She looked around at the robbers, some of whom had stopped eating to view the entertainment. "You leave the librarian alone," she told them. "But he's a liability, a Devi," one whined. "He hasn't got the guts for this life. Let us practice our knife-throwing on him." "Would you go farther east with him?" a Devi asked. At that, the robbers bent, grumbling, to their plates. The arts of thievery are as old as the arts on which thieves thrive. Pico was given an ebony-handled dagger in a leather scabbard that he practiced tossing into a tree trunk, loving the hurtling steel star, the bump if it bedded in the wood, which it seldom did. He was made to mount tall trees, first as best he could, then laden with rock-filled sacks, and his palms blistered, suppurated, and healed, hard as the bark they clutched. He practiced picking a selection of locks, prying with a bent wire, till the tumblers clicked and the tongue snapped back. And he acquired some of the robber's argot. In late afternoons he knife-fought in slow motion with a Devi, learning the feints and counters, when to slash, when to stab, learning to keep his feet flickering, torso angled away from the other's thrusts. She was so beautiful, sliding in and out of the shadows, that sometimes he felt they were dancing, that the banging of blades was part of some rehearsed ritual, and then he did well in matching her offense. But if he thought about the purpose of the metal he wielded, he slipped up, and a Devi, an impatient instructor, flipped and pinned him, dagger point dimpling his neck. He joined the fireside circle in the evenings, clapped in time to the tunes, and the dancing girls gathered round him. They braided his hair, pierced his ears, and swayed him to allow a robber to tattoo his right arm, though he refused the scorpion the rogue wished to engrave, and with mirror and eyeliner sketched onto his skinny bicep an iris. The girls taught him to drink liquor and roll cigarettes, and over time he learned to lean into the ease of the nicotine, the heat of the alcohol, and came to look forward to the nights by the fire, his mind floating in the bowl of his skull. "Why are you sad?" the girls asked, and he told them of Cece's oval lips, the shiver of her feathers against the sky, how her laughter fell to him like the promise of rain, and they sighed. He asked them how they came to this rowdy corner of the woods, and they related stories of groping fathers or vindictive stepmothers, of unforeseen pregnancies or boredom with the pallid men of the city. Their hands were always on him as he listened, on his thin arms, stroking his pale cheeks. But he responded to their attentions so gravely the robbers had no cause for jealousy, and in the days when the camp quieted, when the girls coupled with the thieves, he retired alone to a cleared space. For though he could sleep in a tent if he wished, if the sky was dry, he took the blanket allotted him and napped in the dappled dusk beneath the trees, but not too far from the camp, for the sentry on duty would harumph and look up from honing his dirk if he strayed more than a stone's throw from the fire pit. One moonless night, on a secret trail, a Devi led Pico back to the city by the sea, and he chuckled to think he could have saved 3 days' struggle had he hit on this path from the first. They arrived above the city as the bells pealed at dawn and the winged people scattered from their towers, and Pico thrilled to see again the wings above the sea. He looked as well at his little library on the slopes of the hill, but felt no compulsion to return. It was no longer his home. That day they slept at Forest's edge, and the next night descended to the streets. He'd quit it seemed a year gone by, and he paced the cobbles like one in a dream. Queer, he mused, that I must return to the place where I began my journey in order to continue it. But then perhaps not so strange after all, for such is often the way with poems. Bat, Shriek, and Starshine, their only companions, a Devi and apprentice scaled walls and meandered above mazed alleys, searching houses that concealed treasure. Pico was a mite, a bit of blown fluff aflit on a rooftop, up so high he wanted to sing, to call to the reeling night owls in the streets below, to scream a poem. Windowsill to doorframe to gable, the thieves leaped, tripped across tiles, and saw their shadows misshapen by swags framed on walls by starlight, like the apparitions of lonely hunchbacks releasing frustrations in rooftop tantrums. A Devi sent the thin-shouldered poet through a slit window, and he tiptoed among the sighs of sleepers, dreamers surprisingly vocal, the air filled with unconscious conversation, to unbolt the door for his chief. A Devi took a candle from her bag, and by that leaf of light they searched for gold. They upended inlaid boxes, probing beneath piled dresses, prying at loose bricks, hoping for the blonde shimmer of the metal that stirred the blood. They ladled jewelry into bags, cushioned the clink with folded cloth, then wandered through rooms burdening themselves with loose jade, ivory statuettes, silver spoons, silk. In a cot, a child clutched a porcelain-faced doll, and this a Devi tweaked from tiny fingers and tossed to Pico. The child sighed and shifted on its sheets. Pico wondered what it would have been to be born in such a house, with a mother to place a doll on your chest and tuck you in with a surfeit of kisses and arms to hold you if the wind at your window wailed too shrilly. The child fondled the air, and when a Devi left the room, he snuggled the doll back into its hug. Then a Devi led him out over the rooftops to a great house above the harbor. Deftly she opened an upper window, a twitch of her knife lifting the latch. He followed her downstairs to a big room completely bare of furniture, and watched bewildered while she locked the door and drew the curtains. Then she lit her candle, and he saw the walls were paneled in paintings. Slowly they moved around the room, a Devi lifting her flame to each canvas in turn, her eyes on Pico's face, and he gasped and sighed because the paintings were beautiful and strange, filled with winged fish and bird-headed men, trees with hands on the ends of their branches, and girls with the legs of gazelles, all exquisitely detailed, the colors sumptuous, the faces of the creatures sad. "So beautiful," Pico mumbled. He thought Adevi meant to steal one of these paintings, but when she was sure he had seen all to his satisfaction, she snuffed the light and opened the shutters, and they exited through the upper window, which she closed behind her. Then they snuck along alleys, avoiding lit bars and bantering drunks, back to the forest's edge, where Pico lit a fire while Adevi laid out their loot. Among the items he'd lifted were a dusty bottle of wine, a loaf of bread, and a wedge of cheese, and he cut sandwiches for Adevi and himself and uncorked the wine, and they sat with their backs to trees, looking down the long slope to the shore where fires mocked the tide. The wine was good, and Pico refilled Adevi's cup and then his own, and they rolled cigarettes and sat sipping and smoking. He remembered an old poem. At journey's end, at evening, arriving in a remote town, I walked through deserted streets to a certain house, knock upon a certain door, and only as it opens do I see I stand on my own doorstep, and beyond the threshold a road descends anew through a landscape I left so long ago. The blush of Adevi's cigarette swelled her face from the shadows. Once I would have killed you for that verse, she said. Don't you like poetry? Pico asked, dismayed. It's a fragment I wrote a while ago. It seemed to match my mood tonight. But she was not looking at him. What brings a girl to the robber tribe? She said. What would cause a maiden to leave a city where she can dance all night by the sea? Take coffee and pastries in cafes as bells ring at dawn, barter in bazaars for any trinket she can conceive of, where enough tales arrive from the ocean's 6 edges to keep lifetimes of listeners amused. Poverty, you might guess, but I was born in that last house, the great house by the docks. My parents were performers who earned their gold playing for the elite, and our house was always filled with actors and musicians. What child, growing up in that clamor of creation, would not want to be an artist as well? And such was my wish, but it was not fated. All the talent went to my brother, younger by 2 years. He doodled in the dirt, in the food, in his dish, and his gift was cherished, coddled like a living thing. He was skinny as you, librarian, with the same pale cheeks, always sneezing into silk handkerchiefs, often propped on pillows in a 4-poster bed doted on by doctors. My parents imported the finest paper and paints, stretched canvases that he filled with the fabulous figments of his fantasies. At 15, he couldn't paint fast enough to supply the demand for his work, and visitors arrived from afar to pay him homage, making obeisance as they would to a young prince. Yet it never seemed to affect him, all this praise, and his only wish was to retreat to his room, to the recesses of his imagination, and turn those inner worlds into images. But siblings are rivals whether they know it or not. In me grew such horror at my lack of talent that I knew one of us would have to die in the order the other could simply live. One afternoon I went into his room, and the painting he labored over was so beautiful that emotion welled up inside me, and I snatched the palette knife from his hand and slashed his throat. It felt so good. His blood colored the blank spaces in the canvas, a fulfillment. Yes, I killed my brother. Of all deeds the most abhorrent. To save myself I killed him, and then, though my parents might have thought the murder the act of an intruder, I had to leave the city altogether. I found my way to the bandits in the forest, where I discovered I had a gift after all, a knack for killing. And so you see, librarian, I once would have stabbed you over a poem, for the revelation of another's talent always reminds me of my own barrenness. But in recent years I have begun to encourage the singing and dancing in the evenings in the robber camp where I am queen. What else can I do? What else can I do? Here, said Pico. Drink some more wine. Hold your cup steady. Let me roll you another cigarette. Another night, as they plundered the city, Pico realized he was beneath the tower where Cece lived, and he asked Adevi to wait. "But that's a house of winged people," Adevi said. "They own no gold." "It's a different treasure I'm looking for," he replied, and spiraled up the stairs, and at the top picked a lock and entered a room of winds, bells bulbous above, a room bare save for a few teak chests. The winged people were asleep at the edges of the balustradeless balconies, crouched like great eagles, wings over their heads like feathered counterpanes. Cece was perched at the room's very lip, facing the waves, and he realized with a shock she was awake. No wing bent over her face, but the sea below was so loud she hadn't heard him. For a heady second, he thought he'd walk over, talk to her, then shook his head at his folly. Reaching into his sack, he silently retrieved a golden chain stolen earlier that night and draped it across the doorknob. He looked once again at Cece, then closed the door and descended to Adevi. On the peak of a rooftop they sat a while in the domain of owls, cowled by stars above the sea. "Look there, at that coral wall the waves smash on," Pico said. "That's where I once sat watching the girl I love on the wind. Have you ever been in love, Adevi?" "I've been with 100 men, and I've found that the less love enters in, the better time I have in bed." "Why so many? Wouldn't one be enough?" "I have yet to meet a man who can quench my thirst. I'm looking for a man as strong as I am, stronger than meat, than liquor, a man brave as a frightened mother, with a heart hard as a tooth. The hearts of men are too easily stolen. They are not vigilant in guarding the gates of their ribs, and my thieving fingers can always reach beneath the sternum and snatch it." "What do you do with their hearts?" "I eat them." "Perhaps I'd be better off without a heart," Pico pondered, melancholy. "Without a heart, I wouldn't have the desire to reach the morning town." Adevi rolled a cigarette. "Tell me about this morning town." "Ponpuam. I'd heard of the place as a child and always thought it was in the country of dreams, but now I believe the morning town exists in this world and one may walk there. From the books of the library and from a vision vouchsafed me before I undertook this journey, I know it lies in a desert, tumble down, the stones of its walls crumbling to sand. Among the ruins stands a tower greater than the others, rows of arched casements gazing across the dunes, and in that tower is kept the Book of Flying. Those who reach the town and enter the tower may read the book and learn to fly, may gain their wings. Over the morning town, the winged ones rise. They rise on golden wings to the sun." "Fool," she said, leaning back on the tiles. "You're living in your dreams. This is the world, this breeze on your face, this hot smoke in your lungs, this gold you can dent with your teeth. Learn to enjoy it, or you'll never be happy." "Happiness," sighed Pico, looking out at the first brown strands of dawn on the distant breakers. "Are you happy, Adevi?" "I'm happy when I'm thieving." "What about when you're alone at night? Are you happy then?" "I'm never alone at night." One afternoon she came to him, boisterous as always. "Up, poet, we're off to Burgle," she shouted, and he fetched his black sack and followed her along the path toward the city. After a few minutes she cut left into the woods, and he opened his mouth, but she placed a palm on his lips, whispering, "Follow." Within dense undergrowth she uncovered a tarp and peeled it back. My knapsack! Pico bent to undo the drawstring. He took his books in his hands, caressed them as he might a lover's skin, then looked up at Adevi. Oh, thank you. Thank you. He stood and kissed her cheek. She swatted him away. Pick up your pack and follow me. She hefted a pack of her own, concealed their swags in the tarp beneath bushes, then led him through the forest east and south, curling back in a long loop past the camp. He marveled at her movement, silent and lissom as an antelope's, while he struggled behind her. After an hour, she straightened and walked less carefully, and he caught up. Where are we going, Adevi? He asked. We're running away, she grinned. I've always wanted to explore the deep forest, but none of those cowards would ever come with me. Their mother's story's too potent for them. It's no fun adventuring alone, but when you arrived with your hankering for the East, I knew I'd found a companion. So you'll come with me? To the morning town? Pico cried. As far as I'm concerned, the morning town's moonshine, but I'm not one to pass up an adventure, and you'd never survive alone. Oh, Adevi, how can I thank you? Come on. Led by a dream she doesn't believe in, the robber queen guides the poet through the dark ways, through a domain which seems her own. She wafts among the trees like a breeze, and though the weeks of thievery have lightened Pico's step, he feels stone-footed in her wake. On the third evening of their travels, Adevi stood across the fire from Pico, and to the music of a nearby nightingale and the percussion of her snapping fingers began to dance. He watched through the window of heat that spindled and heightened her motions as she plucked the clothing from her body, the headscarf, vest, white shirt, skirt, all flung to catch on thorns, until she churned like a raw demon aflame, and he sat transfixed by the stare of her violet-eyed breasts. Then she came to him and held him down, and he looked at her and said, Adevi? As if he'd forgotten something, but she covered his mouth with her hand. Later he wept so violently she thought it was a fit, but when she tried to touch him again, he shuddered as though her fingers burned. So you're a virgin, she said, rolling a cigarette. We all were once. You'll learn. You don't understand. I've betrayed her. Your winged girl? He nodded. Hasn't she been with other boys? He nodded. Then you're betraying only your own imagination. That's it, precisely, Pico cried. I've betrayed my imagination. Lie down. But he made her promise that she would not try to touch him again, and that night he lay awake, unable to read or write, the memory of the deed a needle in his heart. In the morning he couldn't eat, and Adevi squatted before him. Look, poet, love is never what we think it will be. Love is like a boy trying to rescue a drowned girl from the sea and falling in himself. Yes, but what a beautiful death. Oh, I wish I had drowned. I wish I had drowned. Love is two blind people sword fighting. Love is a queen on a desert island. Love is self-immolation. Love is running scared in the dark. Love is two people, each of whose saliva is poison for the other. Love is an empty house, a sunken boat, a crippled dancer. Love is the memory of the scent of the breath of a sleeping girl, whispered Pico. Climb down out of your brain, poet. You're tangled in the cobwebs of your dreams. Welcome to the land of your body, with all its guilt, all its ecstasy. But he would not look at her. The sap rose in him again, however, as it always does, drowning the memory of his shame. sending the tendrils of desire from his groin to his skull. So 2 days later, he crept past the warm ashes of the fire long after midnight and crawled into the tides of her breathing and said, "Teach me." For a week, they only left camp to shoot game, for they were always starving. They did not have to go far, for the animals gathered round at evening to see this new beast of the forest, four-legged, two-headed, shouting. "Don't think, don't think," Adevi gasped each night, each morning, as he entered her again and again, as if he might fill the hollow space beneath his breastbone. "It's like eating," he told her. "It's like murder," she said, and, shuddering, he kissed the glyphs of 50 deaths on her forearm. Those fingers which had cupped blood, stopped breath, now clutched his shoulder blades. "What's it like to kill?" he asked. "The pleasure is hidden. Like all the sweetest pleasures, the first taste is bitter. The red grin beneath my brother's chin still curves beneath my eyelids, and unlike the nights of men in bed, each murder since stays quite alone in my mind's eye. I can live each thrust again and again if I wish. It's the ultimate theft, the stealing of another's heartbeat." "What about the dead? Where do they go?" "No one has ever come back from that black doorway to say. It's the one true adventure, unknown, unknowable." "You crave it?" "I'm not afraid of it. That's why I don't lose my fights." "I have wanted death as well, wanted it as badly as I've wanted a woman, to embrace it, to kiss those lavender lips, though I did not seek adventure, but escape." "There is no escape, poet. There's only the unwinding road. You follow the road, or it follows you." "I am trying. I'm trying to follow that road, to reach the morning town." "You're living in your dreams." "Yes, dreams are the seam I mine, the soil I till, the timber I fell. I am a carpenter, sawing, planing, hammering my dreams, jointing them into structures sturdy enough to bear the weight of a body, the weight of flesh. I have my tools, my notebook, my fountain pen." "My tools are my knife, my hands." "Your tongue, your breasts." "The thief entered after midnight, laid me down with a blow to the skull, bound my hands and set a knife to my heart, demanding my money. So I opened my lips, licked away her clothes, lifted my hips to hers, and poured my gold into her satin purse." The meeting between a sad poet and a thief could never be anything but forlorn. As the edges of the novelty were chamfered away, Pico realized that his ache was a wound. Always he tasted blood and knew it was his own. "You have given me something," he told her, "but you've taken something away. In its place, a new thing has grown, and I must be alone to discover what it may be." She had tried to take his heart, but had only stolen his innocence, and what can a thief leave behind but the awareness of loss? So Pico, in a progress through the unknown territory of the forest, finally found words to write a sonnet to his distant winged girl, and Adevi could only sit and watch. Her eyes, which had never lost their appetite, all over his body, her stare, which had never failed to cow men, bring them trembling to her side, now glancing unavailing off the intent poet. In the days, sometimes, she drew her knife and came at him, forcing him to defend himself just so she could touch him, so she could knock him to earth and squat on his chest, teasing open the buttons of his shirt until he giggled and wriggled out from under her. That was Chapter 2 of the Book of Flying. Join us next time for Chapter 3, Duets with a Minotaur.